You can own a tiger. You can own an alligator. You can even legally own a lion in some places. But no matter how rich or powerful you are, you will never own a panda. Because China won't let you. Even the pandas you see in American zoos don't belong to the US. They still belong to China. And if China wants them back, they take them. No discussion. But why does China guard pandas so fiercely? Are they really just trying to protect an endangered species? Or is there something bigger at play? The truth is, pandas are not just cute animals. They are political weapons. And for decades, China has been using them to gain global influence. So, what's really going on? Why does China control every panda in the world? And why will they never let you own one? Let's find out. Before pandas became China's secret diplomatic weapon, they were seen as something else entirely, symbols of peace, prestige, and power. The first recorded panda gift dates back to the 7th century, when Empress Wu Zetian of the Tang dynasty sent a pair of pandas to the Japanese emperor as a token of goodwill. Even then, pandas were rare, exotic, and highly valued. Fast forward to the Cold War, and pandas took on a whole new role. In the 1950s, Mao Zedong revived the practice of gifting pandas, sending them to allied nations like the Soviet Union and North Korea. But in 1972, China made its boldest panda move yet. After President Nixon's historic visit to Beijing, China gifted 2 pandas, Ling Ling and Xing Xing, to the United States as a symbol of friendship. America was obsessed. These pandas became instant celebrities, drawing millions of visitors to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. For decades, China kept up this tradition, sending pandas as goodwill gifts to nations they wanted closer ties with. But then, in the 1980s, something changed. China stopped giving pandas away and started renting them instead. And that's when panda diplomacy became what it is today. At first, China's decision to lease pandas instead of giving them away might have seemed like a simple business move. But in reality, it was a masterclass in soft power diplomacy. China wasn't just lending out cute animals, it was making sure that every country with a panda owed them something. Take the United States, for example. In 2000, when tensions between China and the US were rising over trade policies, China made a strategic move. They approved a new panda loan to the San Diego Zoo. Just days later, trade talks improved. Coincidence? Maybe. But it wasn't the first time China had played this game. In 2011, the UK struck a £2.6 billion trade deal with China. Just months later, the Edinburgh Zoo got its first pair of pandas in nearly 30 years. In 2012, France finally agreed to a multi-billion-dollar aviation deal with China. And then boom, pandas were sent. And if you think pandas are just for making friends, think again. China withholds pandas from countries that step out of line. In 2010, Norway awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to a Chinese dissident, something the Chinese government was not happy about. A few months later, Norway applied for a panda loan. China rejected it outright. It wasn't until 6 years later, after Norway patched things up with China, that their panda request was finally approved. In 2018, Canada arrested a top Chinese executive, and as a result, relations with China soured fast. By 2020, China unexpectedly recalled its pandas from Canada, claiming a bamboo shortage, even though other panda-holding countries had no such problem. When looking at this history, it quickly becomes clear that China strategically places pandas in countries where they want influence, especially in nations with strong economies, key trade relationships, or valuable natural resources. And here's the kicker. China still owns every single one of these pandas. But how is that even possible? It's one thing for China to loan out pandas, but how do they still own them, even when they're born on foreign soil? The answer lies in China's secretive panda contracts, and what's inside them is shocking. Most people assume zoos just borrow pandas as part of conservation efforts. But in reality, getting a panda is like signing an expensive lease agreement with strict terms. Here's how it works. Any country that wants a panda must sign a contract with China's Wildlife Conservation Association. a government-run organization that controls all panda loans. The contract isn't cheap. Zoos have to pay China an average of $1 million per panda per year just to keep them. That's not even counting the millions more that zoos spend on building panda enclosures, importing fresh bamboo, and veterinary care. And if a panda gets pregnant, that's where things get even wilder. Every single panda cub born outside of China still legally belongs to China, no exceptions. Let's say 2 pandas in a US zoo have a baby. In any other scenario, even people, you'd expect the baby to belong to the country where it was born, right? Not with pandas. Even if a foreign zoo wants to keep a panda cub, they have to negotiate a new contract and pay China even more money to extend the loan. Right now, there are only about 1,860 pandas left in the wild, and breeding pandas in captivity is incredibly difficult. Despite China's best efforts, panda reproduction rates remain frustratingly low, and fewer new pandas mean fewer diplomatic opportunities. And China knows this. Recently, China has started pulling back on its panda diplomacy strategy. In 2023, China temporarily recalled all pandas from the US, leaving the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. pandaless for the first time in 50 years. Panda contracts with several European countries are not being renewed, marking a significant shift from past decades. Even Japan and Australia, both strong economic partners for China, have faced delays in securing new panda agreements. If China shifts away from panda diplomacy, it could be a major loss for zoos worldwide, many of which rely on pandas to drive visitor numbers and funding. Regardless of what happens next, one thing is clear. China has mastered the art of using animals as political leverage, and whether pandas remain in zoos around the world or return home to China permanently, they will always be a symbol of China's global power. For most people, pandas are just adorable bamboo-munching fluffballs. But as we've seen, there's so much more than that. China has turned pandas into one of the most effective diplomatic tools in modern history, offering them as rewards, withholding them as punishments, and making sure that every single panda, no matter where it's born, still belongs to China. And now, as panda numbers dwindle, and China begins pulling pandas back home, one thing is clear. These animals were never just about conservation. They were about influence, control, and power. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to punch that subscribe button and subscribe for more wild stories from the intersection of nature and power. Because sometimes the softest diplomacy is also the most powerful.